Christmas Eve, snow fell softly outside, blanketing the quiet Ohio neighborhood in white. Inside the Miller household, warmth filled the air-roasted turkey in the oven, cinnamon rolls cooling on the counter, and the faint crackle of a fireplace in the living room. The family was excited. The two children, Daniel and Lily, had been buzzing around all day, impatient for the next morning when presents would be opened. Their mother, Anne, had decorated the house with twinkling lights, garlands, and the smell of pine from the tree filled the living room. Their father, Mark, poured hot cocoa into mugs and put on soft Christmas music. It was supposed to be a perfect Christmas Eve at 10 p.m. The children were tucked into bed upstairs, whispering about Santa Claus. The parents sat in the living room, watching the lights on the tree blink rhythmically. Everything seemed peaceful, but then something strange happened. Around 11:30 p.m., Anne swore she heard something upstairs, a faint creak like the sound of someone shifting their weight on old wood. At first, she brushed it off, probably one of the kids sneaking out of bed. But when she went to check, both children were sound asleep, small chests rising and falling under the blankets. Relieved, she returned downstairs. At midnight, it started again. This time, both parents heard it, a faint creaking, then silence. Mark turned down the Christmas music, listening closely. The house seemed to hold its breath. Then they heard it, the soft, deliberate sound of footsteps, not the playful scampering of children. Slow, heavy, cautious steps. From above them, Mark's stomach tightened. He looked at Anne, whose face had gone pale. "Maybe it's the pipes," he whispered, though he didn't believe it himself. He grabbed a flashlight and headed for the staircase. As he reached the top, he froze. The hallway was dark, but something felt off. The air seemed heavier, colder. He clicked the flashlight on, scanning the floor. That's when he noticed it. The children's bedroom doors were slightly open. He was sure he had shut them completely earlier. He stepped closer, heart pounding. Inside Daniel's room, nothing seemed disturbed, just the boy sleeping soundly. But as he swung the light toward Lily's room, he caught sight of something chilling. Her window was open. Snowflakes drifted onto the sill, melting into small puddles on the hardwood floor. And there, just beneath the window, were footprints. Wet, muddy footprints, leading into the room, then back out into the hallway. Someone had been inside. Mark rushed to shut the window, his hands trembling. He whispered Lily's name, but she remained asleep, unaware of what had happened. He followed the muddy prints into the hall, only for them to vanish halfway down the corridor, as if the intruder had simply disappeared into thin air. When he returned downstairs, Anne was waiting anxiously by the tree. "Well?" she asked. Mark didn't answer right away. He didn't want to scare her, but the truth was clear. Someone had been inside their home. Then, they both noticed something horrifying. The front door. It was slightly open, just an inch, enough to let in the freezing air. Mark knew he had locked it earlier. His wife clutched his arm. "We need to call the police." Before he could answer, there was a sound. From the kitchen, something small fallen to the ground. Mark raised the flashlight, his breath shallow, and stepped carefully toward the sound. The kitchen was dark, but as the beam of light swept across the counters, he saw the pie dish on the floor, shattered. Beside it were smudged fingerprints on the counter, trailing toward the living room. Whoever was inside hadn't left yet. He whispered to Anne to take the children and lock themselves in the bathroom upstairs. She nodded, her eyes wide with terror, and hurried to gather the kids. Mark gripped the flashlight like a weapon and edged toward the living room. His footsteps were slow, deliberate, matching the pounding rhythm of his heart. The Christmas tree glowed softly, casting strange shadows across the walls. The presents sat neatly wrapped underneath. But something was wrong. The gifts had been moved, not opened, just shifted, rearranged, as though someone had been examining them. Then he saw it in the reflection of a glass ornament on the tree. A shape, a tall, thin figure, standing in the far corner of the room, completely still, watching Doc Mark spun around, shining the flashlight directly at it, but the corner was empty. His pulse hammered in his ears. Was he imagining things? He backed away slowly, heading for the stairs, when suddenly the front door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The sound shook the whole house. Moments later, the wail of sirens echoed through the neighborhood. Anne had managed to call 911 upstairs. When the police arrived, they searched every inch of the house. In the snow outside, they found a set of footprints leading away from the front door, then circling back to the rear of the house. Whoever it was had been watching them long before they came inside. And inside, the officers found more evidence. Fingerprints on the children's toys, smudges on the banister, even a single muddy handprint pressed against the hallway wall, as if the intruder had stopped to listen. The police told them the truth. The person had likely been inside for hours, moving silently through the rooms, waiting, watching that Christmas Eve. The Millers learned a terrifying lesson. Not every visitor on Christmas night comes bearing gifts. Some come only to take your peace and leave behind the kind of fear you never forget. The holiday season is always filled with cheer, laughter, and the sight of Santa Claus sitting at the center of malls, waiting for children to climb onto his lap. But in 2012, at a shopping mall in Texas, something was different. The mall was decorated from floor to ceiling. Giant wreaths hung from the walls, garlands stretched across railings, and the smell of gingerbread and roasted nuts drifted through the air. Families moved in a steady stream, carrying bags of last-minute gifts. Children tugged at their parents' coats, begging to see Santa before heading home. That year, the line to meet Santa was especially long. Parents stood patiently, phones in hand, while their children rehearsed what they wanted to say. Some wanted dolls, others bikes, and a few just wanted candy. It was supposed to be harmless, festive fun, but parents started to notice something odd. This Santa didn't laugh. He didn't speak much at all. No deep, jolly ho-ho, no cheerful banter, no warm chuckle. Instead, he sat perfectly still, nodding silently whenever a child approached. He'd gesture with one hand for the kids to climb onto his lap, then stare as the photographer snapped a quick picture. At first, no one thought too much of it. Maybe the man was tired. Maybe it had been a long day. But as the hours passed, the strangeness only deepened. His eyes never seemed to blink. His body barely shifted in the chair, and the longer people looked at him, the more they realized something wasn't right. One mother, Melissa, recalled it vividly. Her 6-year-old son had been excited all week to tell Santa what he wanted for Christmas, but the moment he climbed onto the man's lap, his smile faded. Melissa noticed her son stiffen, his small hands clutching nervously at his knees. Santa leaned down slightly, and for the first time that day, he spoke. His voice was low, raspy, almost like a whisper. He said something to the boy. Melissa leaned closer, trying to hear, but the words were muffled. When her son returned to her side, his face was pale. "What did Santa say?" she asked. The boy shook his head, refusing to answer. His eyes darted toward the man in the chair, then quickly back to the floor. Finally, after Melissa pressed him, he whispered. He said, "I'll see you tonight." A chill ran down her spine. At first, she thought maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe it was some strange joke, but her son refused to get back in line. He clung to her coat, trembling, as though he'd just seen a monster. Melissa immediately went to speak to the event organizers, but what she discovered left her shaken to her core. The mall's hired Santa had called in sick that morning. The organizers had been scrambling to find a replacement when, conveniently, a man in a full Santa costume had arrived. He claimed he was filling in, that he'd been hired through a local agency. In the chaos of the holiday rush, no one questioned it. They simply placed him in the chair, grateful to keep the tradition going. But when Melissa asked which agency had sent him, the organizers looked at each other in confusion. They hadn't called anyone. No replacement had been booked. And just like that, panic began to spread. Security guards were alerted immediately. But when they returned to the stage where Santa had been sitting, the chair was empty. The red suit, the white beard, the gloves gone, as if he had vanished into the crowd. Mall security combed through the cameras. What they found only made the situation worse. The man had been caught on several feeds, moving silently through the mall before sitting in the chair. He avoided the cameras as much as possible, often tilting his head down or stepping just out of frame. After leaving the Santa area, he was seen walking toward a side exit near the parking lot. But then, the footage ended. The next camera along that corridor never showed him passing through. No doors opened. No figure appeared. He simply vanished between one camera and the next. The police were called, but the trail led nowhere. Witnesses described him differently. Some swore he was tall. Others insisted he was shorter. Some said his eyes were dark and hollow. Others claimed they were blue and wide. It was almost as if every person had seen a slightly different version of him. Melissa didn't sleep that night. She stayed awake, checking the logs, keeping her son close. She couldn't shake the memory of what he had whispered. "I'll see you tonight." Thankfully, nothing happened. At least, not to her. But in the days that followed, strange reports began to surface. Parents in nearby towns said their children had woken up screaming on Christmas Eve, claiming they had seen Santa standing in their rooms. Neighbors spotted a man in a red suit walking through the snow long after midnight, never leaving footprints behind. The police dismissed it as hysteria, fueled by rumors spreading online. But to this day, no one knows who that man was or why he appeared in that mall. What haunts Melissa most is not the memory of the whisper, not the vanishing footage, not even the missing Santa himself. It's the way her son still refuses to talk about that moment. Years later, whenever she asks him what exactly Santa said in his ear, he simply shakes his head, his face pale, and says, "Mom, it wasn't his voice." Christmas night in Minnesota is often described as magical. The air is crisp. The snow glistens under the glow of streetlights, and families retreat into their warm homes after long days of celebration. But for one teenage girl named Claire, Christmas night turned into something she would never forget. Her family lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside of town. Their house sat on the corner of a snow-covered street, framed by tall pine trees. Inside, the smell of hot cocoa and gingerbread lingered in the kitchen, and the fireplace glowed warmly in the living room. It was late, close to midnight, when most families had already gone to bed. Claire, however, was awake. She had been reading in her room, but grew thirsty. Wrapping herself in a blanket, she tiptoed to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so, with only the faint hum of the heater breaking the silence. As she filled her glass, her eyes drifted toward the frosted window, and that's when she saw it. A snowman had stood in the middle of their yard, directly facing the house. At first, she smiled. It wasn't unusual for kids in the neighborhood to build snowmen, okay? And maybe one of the neighbor's children had decided to make one for fun. But the more she looked, the more unsettled she became. It wasn't shaped like the playful snowman she was used to. Its proportions were wrong, taller, slimmer, its head smaller than it should have been, and its face wasn't right. There were no coal eyes, no carrot nose. Instead, it seemed to have been shaped with something else, smooth, featureless at first glance. But the longer she stared, the more she realized the face wasn't blank. It was a mask, not a real one, but sculpted into the snow. A white, expressionless face with empty eyes and a thin, straight mouth. A face that seemed to be watching her. Her stomach dropped. She stepped back from the window, convincing herself it was just her imagination. Maybe the snow had settled in an odd way. Maybe she was tired. She turned away and went back to her room, trying to shake off the unease. But curiosity gnawed at her minutes later. She peeked through her curtains. The snowman was closer, not by much, but enough to notice. It no longer stood in the center of the yard. It was just a few feet nearer to the house. And this time, she was certain there were no footprints leading up to it. She shut her curtains quickly, heart pounding. Her parents were asleep, and she didn't want to wake them over what might just be her imagination. Still, she couldn't bring herself to sleep. She lay in bed, every creak of the house making her jump. Every gust of wind against the window sending a shiver down her spine. At around 2 a.m., she heard it, a sound outside, a faint crunching, like snow being compressed under weight. Slowly, cautiously, she got up and pulled her curtains aside again. The snowman was at the edge of the porch, closer now, its head tilted slightly upward, as though looking straight into her window. Her throat went dry. Panicked, she rushed to her parents' room, shaking her mother awake. At first, her mother dismissed it. Probably just kids playing a prank, she said. But when they both looked out the window, the yard was empty. No snowman, nothing but an untouched blanket of white. Her mother reassured her, saying maybe she had been half dreaming. Claire wanted to believe it. She tried to, but when she returned to her room and looked again, her heart froze. The snowman was back, right outside her window, its face pressed slightly toward the glass. She screamed. This time, her father bolted from his room, storming through the house and out the front door. But when he reached the yard, the snowman was gone. No lumps of snow, no scattered remains, nothing except for 2 heavy boot prints deep in the snow, directly below her window, facing the house. The police were called, but there was little they could do. They searched the property, found no signs of forced entry, and no one wandering the neighborhood at that hour. They told the family it was probably just a prankster, someone who wanted to scare them. But Claire knew what she saw. For weeks after, she couldn't sleep near her window. She begged her parents to move her bed, and every night, she swore she heard faint crunching noises outside, just beyond the glass. And what disturbs her most to this day is not the memory of that faceless snowman, but a detail she kept to herself for years, when it had been right outside her window. Its face hadn't been made of snow anymore. It had been a real mask, one she swore she saw, breathing. It was 1995, and the little town in Pennsylvania was alive with the Christmas spirit. Every December, families lined their streets with lights, decorations, and displays so bright that people from neighboring towns would drive in just to see them. The whole street looked like something out of a postcard read in green bulbs twinkling across rooftops, inflatable Santas waving at passing cars, and nativity scenes glowing under the falling snow. One man in particular, a retired school teacher named Mr. Reynolds, took pride in his decorations. Every year, he added something new. One year, it was reindeer on the roof. The next, a giant glowing star at the top of the pine tree in his yard. He spent hours untangling cords, testing bulbs, making sure his house shone the brightest on the block. That December night, the town was quiet and snow fell steadily. The lights glowed softly against the white drifts, filling the neighborhood with a gentle hum of electricity. Families were asleep, their homes warm and cozy, never suspecting that anything was wrong. Around midnight, Mr. Reynolds woke suddenly. He couldn't explain why there hadn't been a sound, no crash or knock, just an uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. He shuffled to the window, pulled back the curtain, and froze. His street was dark, not dim, not partly lit, completely dark. Every single decoration, his neighbors, even the massive star at the end of the block, was gone. No twinkling lights, no glowing Santas, no warm holiday cheer, just a pitch black street under the falling snow. He blinked, thinking Maybe the power had gone out, but no, the street lamps still glowed faintly. Houses still had lights in their windows. The electricity was fine. Only the Christmas decorations were missing. He dressed quickly and stepped outside, his breath clouding in the freezing air. The silence was heavy, thicker than usual, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. And then he saw something that made his blood run cold. There were no cords, no bulbs, no plastic figures, nothing left behind. Every light, every decoration had been stripped away, cleanly, almost carefully. It was as if someone or something had taken the time to remove each one without leaving a single trace. The next morning, the entire neighborhood gathered in confusion. People demanded answers, but no one had seen or heard anything. Some neighbors swore they had gone to bed with their lights still on. Others insisted they had heard faint buzzing, almost like electricity, just before midnight. Police were called. They searched the area, expecting to find discarded lights in dumpsters or signs of theft. But what they found was worse. Half a mile away, deep in the woods, they discovered something strange. All of the decorations, the strings of lights, the glowing reindeer, the inflatable Santas had been piled together, not scattered, not stolen, but stacked neatly, almost like a nest. The wires were tangled in tight knots, the bulbs pressed together in unnatural clusters. Some lights still flickered faintly, glowing weakly in the snow. The pile was massive, almost towering, like some kind of shrine. No footprints led to it, no tire tracks in the snow. It was just there. The police couldn't explain it. There were no suspects, no evidence of trucks or tools used to haul the decorations away. And yet, dozens of houses had been stripped bare in a matter of minutes. That night, some families chose not to redecorate. They left their homes plain, unsettled by the idea of it happening again. But others were determined not to let the incident kill their holiday spirit. They put their lights back up, plugged them in, told themselves it was just a prank. But then it happened again. The following night, around the same time, entire blocks of lights vanished. Again, they were found in the woods, this time stacked even higher. The wires twisted into shapes that almost resembled arms or faces, or things no one wanted to look at too closely. Neighbors started whispering about it. Some claimed they saw a faint glow moving through the woods at night, like the lights were being carried away in silence. Others swore they heard humming outside their windows, low and rhythmic, just before everything went dark. One family reported something even more disturbing. They had left their lights on a timer, set to turn off at 2 a.m. But when they woke up at midnight, they found all their decorations glowing brighter than usual, almost blinding, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then, in an instant, they went black. The next morning, the lights were gone. By Christmas Eve, the neighborhood was silent and dark. Not a single house dared to hang another string of lights. The tradition was broken, replaced by fear. Years later, people still talk about that December, about the Christmas light thief, as some called it. But the truth is, no thief was ever found. And when locals remember the piles of tangled, glowing decorations in the woods, they don't describe them as theft at all. They describe them as something, catering, collecting, like something out there needed the light for itself. There's something deeply unsettling about Christmas night, when the carolers go home, when the laughter fades, and when the cold truly sets in. A strange silence takes over. It's not the warm silence of peace, but an eerie stillness, like the world is holding its breath. This story was sent to me by a man named Henry, who swears to this day that something followed him and his family one Christmas Eve in 1998. He told me that no matter how much time passes, every Christmas brings the same memories and the same chill crawling through his bones. Henry grew up in a small, rural town in Ohio. His family wasn't wealthy, but they always made Christmas special. That particular year, The snow was heavy. His father had cut down a tree from the woods, and his mother had baked cinnamon rolls for breakfast. The entire day had been filled with music, warmth, and the soft glow of Christmas lights strung around their modest little house. Then came nightfall, around 11:45 p.m. Henry remembers lying on the couch, staring at the flickering lights of the Christmas tree. His parents had gone upstairs to bed, and the house had grown quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the old wooden floors creak and the faint whistle of wind outside the windows. That's when it happened. A knock. 3 deliberate knocks at the front door. Henry sat up instantly. It was late, too late for visitors, and they lived miles from their nearest neighbor. His first thought was that maybe someone had gotten stranded in the snowstorm that had started earlier in the evening. He peered through the window, but all he saw was darkness. The yard, covered in snow, looked untouched. No tracks, no sign of anyone. Another knock, louder this time. Henry's father came down the stairs, clearly annoyed. Who in the world would be out here at this hour? He muttered. He grabbed a flashlight and went to the door, pulling Henry back when he tried to follow. Stay behind me. When he opened the door, the cold rushed in. But there was no one there, only the empty porch, the sound of wind and untouched snow. Henry swore he felt something watching him from beyond the tree line, just far enough that the flashlight beam couldn't reach. His father stepped outside for a moment, shining the light around, but the snow was perfectly smooth. No footprints, nothing, just that endless blanket of white. They shut the door and locked it, chalking it up to maybe the wind knocking something loose. But Henry knew better. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had been right there, something waiting at exactly midnight. It happened again, this time not at the front door. The knocking came from the back of the house. 3 slow, heavy thuds against the back door, like someone was pressing their knuckles hard into the wood. Henry's mother screamed upstairs, and his father rushed to grab the rifle he kept in the closet. They all gathered in the kitchen where the back door was. Henry remembers the Christmas lights casting a strange red and green glow across the room, almost making it look sinister. His father shouted out into the night, warning whoever it was to leave. Then he flung the door open, rifle raised. But again, nothing this time though. There were tracks, not footprints, but long, deep drag marks in the snow, leading from the woods to the back porch, like something heavy had been pulled across the yard. But the tracks didn't go back. They stopped right there. At their door, the family didn't sleep that night. They sat in the living room with every light on, staring at the windows, waiting for another knock, but the knocking never came. When morning arrived, the drag marks in the snow were gone, completely smoothed over like they had never existed. Henry told me that his family tried to pretend it never happened. But every year since then, the knocking has returned, always on Christmas Eve, always at 11:45 p.m., and again at midnight. He says it doesn't matter where he is, his parents' old home, his own house in another town. Even once when he stayed at a hotel, the knocks always find him, and when he listens closely, when he presses his ear to the door, he swears he can hear something breathing on the other side, waiting.